Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Cameron here
And Nicole.
with I'm Not Crazy Podcast, breaking down true crime and mystery and
cryptids and all the fun stuff that people feel awkward talking about.
That's us. Today's a Nicole episode. I'm not entirely sure what this is about, but I've been told this is the case of Jaclyn Dowaliby. So
Correct.
with that, take it away.
Okay. So like I was telling you before, this case geographically hits a little close to home.
Okay. Illinois-based?
Illinois-based, yes. South side.
Oh, closer to us.
Yes, closer to us.
Okay.
Our friend mentioned the case before, so I'm actually kind of surprised that the name didn't stick. But that's okay. I'll take it away and I'll get to the nitty-gritty details of how everything transpired. There's a lot of names, so try to keep up, people.
Okay, great.
So 7-year-old Jaclyn Marie Dowaliby was last seen alive on Friday, September 9th of 1988. The discovery of her body and the trial continues to divide opinions to this day, and even inspired the 1996 movie called Gone in the Night. I forgot her name again.
I don't think I've seen that. We were talking about it before. Oh, Shannon Doherty.
Shannon Doherty. The only thing I know is the problematic actress 90210.
Oh, that's factual too.
So Jaclyn Dowaliby lived with her mom, Cynthia, her younger brother, Davey, her stepfather, David, and then David's mother, Jaclyn's grandmother, Anna, in Midlothian, Illinois.
Okay. What are the age groups we're talking here for the kids?
So from what I read, Jaclyn Dowaliby was 7.
Okay. For some reason, I thought this was going to be older teenage stuff. Okay.
No, young. So Jaclyn Dowaliby's 7, and then her younger brother, Davey, is about 4 years old.
Okay.
From what I read. So I'm going to kind of go through day by day how everything went down according to case reports and their reports. So again, try to keep up.
Okay, I'm here.
It was Friday, September 9th of 1988. Like any normal Friday at the Dowalibys, David came home from bowling at Anchor Bowl in Blue Island at around 9:20 p.m. Cynthia, who's the mom, was home with the kids, Jaclyn and Davey. Anna, who's the grandmother, and David's sister, Michelle Goldrick. They were all home at the time he got back from bowling.
Okay.
It was noted that Michelle did leave shortly after David came home.
Okay.
Where'd
she go?
Probably to her house.
Okay, just checking. If this is a murder case, right? I need to keep all my suspects together, you know?
So, okay, yeah, true. Both Jaclyn and stepdad David went to bed at about 10:30 p.m. Grandma...
Kind of late for a 7-year-old. Well, maybe not. Yeah, go on.
I think you were a kid that stayed up late from what you told me.
Theoretically, I had a bedtime of like 10 up until a certain age, but...
It's a Friday night. Get crazy. Much like Anna, who left around 10:30 p.m. to go to Papasino's restaurant at Oak Forest.
Papasino's. I don't know that, but it sounds delicious.
It sounds great. She did state that she left through the back door and made sure it was locked. This is just something important to just kind of keep in your brain.
Remember this for later.
It was noted that Anna did not have a front door key and she did not come home that evening. So kind of to give you a better idea of the layout of the house.
Okay.
From what I read, it was Grandma's house.
Okay.
But Grandma had an apartment set up in the basement and she had her own entrance, which was the back door.
Okay. So they're all living together, but it is like separate living
It is
sections.
separate. Yeah.
Okay.
Davey, who's the youngest, stayed up late with his mom, getting wild, watching TV.
88 MTV.
I know. And went to bed at around 11:30 p.m. Around that time, Cynthia went through the house, like I feel like any normal person would, to make sure all the lights were off and then check to make sure that the kids...
You'd be surprised how little I check things are off or doors are officially locked.
Oh, I always check. So she made sure that all the lights were off and then she checked on the kids before going to bed.
I mean, I guess if I had to check on kids, there might be some more steps in there, but I mean...
I'd like to make sure that all the lights are off.
As far as my safety goes, I'm totally ready to wake up to an attacker in the middle of the night and fend myself. That's how I live my life.
I don't. I make sure all the doors are locked and I make sure that all the lights are shut off.
That's why the tomahawk's within reach under the bed.
So the morning of Saturday, September 10th, David's alarm went off at about 7:30 p.m. He was supposed to play golf that morning, but he decided sleep was more important. Understandably so.
Feel that. Push your tea time.
At around 8 a.m., Jaclyn's younger brother, Davey, got up early and woke up David, so stepdad. David got up and went to the living room and saw that the front door was wide open.
The person the other night left through the back door though, right?
Yeah, Grandma left through the back door.
So there was no one moving through the front door. Okay,
correct.
So suspicious.
Yeah. He didn't think much of it and closed the door, sat down, and just watched cartoons with Davey that Saturday morning.
Saturday morning.
He assumed that his mother had come home late and forgot to shut the front door on her way down to her basement bedroom.
What time of year was this again?
So this was in 1988, so late 80s.
88, but do we have like a time of year? Is this winter? Is this...
September.
Okay.
So like fall.
Okay. There was this one time the band was staying over at a recording studio, and as the night got later, we were like, God, it's freezing in here. Someone woke up the next morning and realized it was like dead of winter. We just left the freaking door open all night, and we were like in a basement, so the cold was just seeping in. Yeah, we woke up, it was like dangerously cold in that person's house.
Just saying, it's important to check everything before you go to bed. It was also mentioned that his mother's car wasn't in the driveway that morning, but he didn't go to check on her in the basement at that time.
Okay.
So Cynthia, who's the mom, woke up at around 9 o'clock, went to Jaclyn's room to wake her up, but when she walked into her room, she didn't find her in her bed. She asked David, stepdad, if he had seen her, and they both thought she maybe went out to play with her neighborhood friends, so they got in their pickup truck and drove around the neighborhood looking for her.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, Anna, who's the grandma, came home for the first time since she left at around 10:30 p.m. on Friday.
And she was going to the Italian-sounding place, or that was someone else?
So when I was doing a little bit more research, Grandma was able to hang. So Grandma went to this restaurant, and then she ended up at like...
Villa Pianos. That's not what it is, but...
Papasino's. But she... went to the restaurant and then ended up at another place, like I think it was a bar area.
That's usually where
she met up with like another friend, and then she ended up crashing at their place.
Solid. Cool grandma.
As time passed and Cynthia saw no sign of her daughter coming home, she hurried to the neighbor's house to see if her daughter was there. As she was walking down her driveway, she noticed the basement window to Anna's apartment was broken, which led her to believe an intruder entered the house through the window, took Jaclyn, and escaped through the front door.
Mm-hmm.
Cynthia had David call the Midlothian Police Department at about 10:26 a.m.
Okay.
The local police and FBI were at the house within a matter of hours and then began their investigation. They noted initially that the window appeared to have been broken in from the inside out. There was no dust on the windowsill, and it didn't appear to be disturbed.
Okay. Someone from the inside broke the inside to the out.
Yes, correct.
Gotcha.
The police also located blood on one of Jaclyn's pillows in her bedroom.
Is this going to be like an early case of someone being trapped in the basement?
Listen.
Okay.
Listen and find out.
Grandma is going to be weird, isn't she? She's going to have some demons in her closet. Sorry, go on.
So fingerprints and other evidence were gathered throughout the home and also from the Dowalibys' cars. This is also something else to note. So they owned 2 vans, a truck, and a light blue Chevy Malibu.
A lot of cars. A lot of big cars.
Mm-hmm. So the police were prepared for a potential ransom demand, but unfortunately none ever came. Cynthia thought back to a traumatizing event that had taken place a few years previously. So after a bitter custody battle with her ex-partner, Jimmy Guess, who is Jaclyn's biological father, he had unsuccessfully attempted to win custody of Jaclyn. He broke into their home and also tried to kidnap her.
Okay, so we have a likely suspect already.
So Cynthia immediately suspected that he had something to do with this disappearance. She certainly knew that he was capable. However, unbeknownst to her, Jimmy was in prison in Florida at the time of the disappearance, and he had been previously there for about 4 months.
Okay.
So he was eliminated.
Solid alibi.
Yeah, and he was eliminated as a suspect right away. On September 11th, David Dowaliby agreed to take a polygraph at the FBI building in Chicago, and he had passed.
Not a creepy stepfather situation.
Nope. On Wednesday, September 14th, 3 days after he took this polygraph test with the FBI, he was asked by the local police to take another polygraph.
Okay.
Local police reported that he was resistant to the idea because he already had done one with the FBI.
Sure, and I would probably assume that theirs is more thorough than local police.
Right.
Even though we shouldn't really trust those too much anyway.
Right.
With my anxiety, I think I would just always set it off. He's definitely lying. He's not Cameron Jones.
So anyways, the results of the second polygraph test were inconclusive. The police also stated that David had been uncooperative during the polygraph test.
Okay.
So the reasoning behind this is because apparently David accused them of asking disturbing test questions about his daughter and her potential death, and stated that it upset him when they asked him to say yes to them in order to set a standard for the test.
That seems
I think it's
somewhat reasonable.
right?
Yeah. It's, if they're just pushing and being aggressive, you've already done it once and they're just telling you messed up details. I don't want to hear that.
Right. So that same day, the same day that he was taking the polygraph test, at around 5:45 p.m., and about 3 miles away from the Dowalibys' home, Jaclyn's body had been found by Michael Chapman, who lives...
Fisher, Hunter, what do we got?
They just said who lives at the Islander Apartments in Blue Island. So just a resident.
Okay, so just like in city limits. This isn't like a rural thing. This is like a southern Chicago suburb.
Yeah.
Like just classic houses and like pretty streets and stuff. I mean,
yeah.
Huh.
So Michael Chapman, the guy who lives at the Islander Apartments, states that he arrived in the rear parking lot of his home at around 5:45 p.m. when he smelled a strong foul odor. When he looked in the heavily overgrown brush about 2 feet from the parking lot, he saw something wrapped in a covering and what appeared to be a small body. Okay. When police arrived, it was Jaclyn's body wrapped in a multicolored quilt, and she was exposed from the torso up and was sadly decomposing at this point.
How many days has it been since her disappearance?
So at this point, she disappeared on technically the 10th.
Okay.
And we're on the 14th.
Okay, so only 4 days now.
Yeah.
So probably assuming by decomposition that she died a while ago, closer to the disappearance.
Yeah. So from what I read, and we'll kind of touch base on this a little further along, they weren't really able to tell the accurate time of death just because of how much she was decomposing, like maggots, like nastiness.
Okay.
But I think it was
like hearing that.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, they weren't. It was pretty inconclusive, the exact time of death.
Okay. Cause of death? Do we have this?
So let me go ahead and touch base on it.
All right.
It was noted that she was not gagged and there were no bruises to her head or face, but there was a rope wound tightly around her neck twice.
Well, that'll do it.
This rope was later to be identified as the one that Davy...
But there were no bruises or any marks from it?
They said that there was no bruises to her head, so I'm assuming that she wasn't like hit in the head or
so she was strangled by a rope. Okay.
So this rope was later identified as one that Davy and Jaclyn used to play with at home. I guess it was like in their backyard.
Like a jumping rope or just, the good old family play rope?
I guess just like a regular, like just rope that they used to
what
play with.
What were they playing?
I don't know. What do kids play?
Other than jump rope, I don't know what you do with rope.
I don't know, but they said it was just
a tire, a tree.
Maybe. So there was also a pair of white cotton panties that were lying about 1 foot of Jaclyn's feet. Now, this automatically led me to believe that maybe sexual assault.
Well, that's where my head was going. I feel like in most child abductions, if it isn't a ransom, that's kind of where you would go.
But according to forensic reports, despite how her panties were lying about 1 foot away from her, she was not sexually assaulted.
Well, that's good, at least.
Yeah.
I mean, this is really sad and tragic, but that's nice.
Yeah. So her exact date of death, like I mentioned, was pretty undetermined, but they estimated that it was between September 10th and September 14th due to her decomposition.
Okay.
Jaclyn was finally laid to rest on September 17th, while the family grieved and the FBI began to suspect that the parents were involved, unfortunately.
I feel like in most of these kind of cases, especially if it seems like an inside job with that window thing.
Yeah.
A little bit of a John Benet Ramsey situation going on.
Yeah,
there.
that's what I was reading, that this is like one of those that is kind of like
linked to it. And
yeah, people think that there's some parallels. So the Blue Island and the Midlothian police ran a joint investigation while the FBI ran their own investigation into Jaclyn's death.
I just don't think my murder case is going to garner the FBI, unfortunately. I think I'm just going to be the regular Blue Island PD for me.
So David and Cynthia were arrested and charged with the murder of Jaclyn just 2 months after her disappearance, while Cynthia Dowaliby was pregnant at the time.
Ooh. But do they have evidence, or is it just because...
So I'm going to
All right.
get
Sorry.
into this. So the Dowalibys denied any involvement, and the case went to trial in April of 1990. The prosecution's case was built primarily on circumstantial evidence and the statement of a witness.
Who's this witness?
This witness just like floored me.
Okay. So circumstantial, already not good, weak, and witness testimonies, you often kind of unreliable as well.
Oh, wait till you hear this. So the statement of this witness was a transit worker by the name of Everett Mann. He testified that he returned to his apartment at the Islander Apartments in Blue Island at around 2 a.m. on September 10th of 1988. When he arrived, Mann noted that he was unable to find a parking spot in the front of his building, so he drove down to the rear parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
When he was pulling into a parking space, he noticed to his right a set of headlights go near the middle of the driveway, which is close to where Jaclyn's body had been found.
Okay, so he's going to say he saw the person dumping. Did he see it, or did he just say, I saw a car?
Mann observed the car leaving the lot, stating that the vehicle appeared to be a dark-colored, late-model, mid-sized car, possibly a late 1970s Malibu, and saw the profile of a driver who was a large-nosed male.
Okay.
He was unable to get an accurate description of the driver since it was dark and there was not a street lamp to get a closer view, which made him unable to determine on whether the person he saw was Caucasian or African American.
Okay, so he didn't see shit.
No.
Okay, interesting. You know, if I was ever, I always think about this, like if I get hit or like hit and run, I'm terrible at making models. So I'm like, I don't know, it was like a black car and I can't narrow it down more than that. Up until like a few years ago, I called every SUV a Jeep for some, everything.
Really?
They're all Jeeps. They're all that shape.
You're like my mother.
Strong.
Strong. On September 16th of 1988, after being shown 5 front-viewed and full-faced photographs, including one of David's, Everett Mann picked David's photo as the man he had seen in the parking lot near the field and stated David's nose structure looked similar to the profile of the nose of the person he saw on September 10th of 1988.
That's a bummer. So he's just very ambiguous person.
Oh,
generic face.
Wait till you hear this. According to court case records, it was noted that for some odd reason, David's photo was 30% larger than the other 4 photos.
Ooh, okay. So
wait for it.
So he was being set up.
So wait for it. When it came to questioning the vehicle Everett Mann saw, he explained that the light blue car could appear dark because the lighting in the parking lot was not very good. I feel like you would be able to determine if a car is dark versus a car that is light.
I mean, I'm bad with makes and models, but I could give you a color and a shape. You know what I mean? I can point you in a direction.
So I think we can rule out.
So it was a car and a guy. We know that much to be true.
So we can rule out that this eyewitness testimony is completely unreliable.
Yeah. Okay.
It was also entered as evidence that the blood on the pillow from Jaclyn's bedroom matched Jaclyn's O blood type. There were hairs found in the trunk of David's car that were the same color as Jaclyn's, and the long rope found around Jaclyn is the same one she and her brother Davey often played with in the backyard. Again, I don't know what kind of rope this is, but this is a rope.
It's classic play rope.
Yep.
As one does.
So during the trial, it was alleged that Davey, Jaclyn's little brother, had told police during questioning that his parents spanked them a lot, Jaclyn more than him.
Okay.
But it was also later stated that this was false.
Oh, okay. So he's just a lying little boy?
It's just, as I was reading this case, I think what was infuriating to me was there was a lot of back and forth, and a lot of the evidence I feel like was just completely unreliable. It was just like people were trying to fit things.
Mm-hmm. Lazy police work.
Yeah. Like you're trying to fit a circle into a square.
Okay.
Is how I felt. The prosecution also had pointed out mistakes made early in the investigation, such as the broken glass from the basement window, as it was later confirmed to have been broken from the outside in and not from the inside out.
That's a pretty big mistake to make. And I feel like one you should kind of be able
that's
to
why
tell.
I was saying that this whole thing, like as I was like reading like the court case files and then like doing research on like the few articles that I could find, it was just kind of infuriating.
Yeah, that's a pretty big mistake. And also, it's like kind of really the only damning evidence I've heard so far for the parents. So.
During the trial, the Dowalibys' lawyers claimed the likely culprit was convicted sex offender Perry Hernandez.
Okay.
We're going to go a little into detail about his crimes.
Okay.
A 6 to 7-year-old girl was abducted in Blue Island, Illinois in 1989 and taken to a nearby railroad bridge along the Calumet River, where she had been sexually assaulted by her neighbor, Perry Hernandez.
Okay.
The abduction had occurred in a similar way to Jaclyn's. He had broken a window, climbed in, and walked out without waking anybody.
I don't know if I'd wake up to a breaking window. I assume I'm a pretty deep sleeper.
I would wake up to a breaking window for sure.
Tell me to grab the tomahawk.
Perry Hernandez was 25 at the time and a convicted burglar. He was brought before the court at the Dowaliby trial and identified by the defense as a suspect they believed had killed Jaclyn. Hernandez pleaded the fifth at the trial and later denied any involvement in Jaclyn's death through statements from his lawyer. In the case of Hernandez kidnapping his neighbor, it occurred roughly a year after Jaclyn's disappearance and death, and she was found less than 3 miles from where Hernandez lived at the time. They all lived like around the same area.
Adding up.
And it was noted that Perry's girlfriend at the time only lived 5 blocks from the Dowaliby home at the time of Jaclyn's murder, and she also owned a Chevy Malibu, and Perry stayed at her apartment quite often.
Okay, so this is adding up quite a bit. Everything's falling in line.
But other than this defense, they could not prove the Dowalibys have ever crossed paths with Hernandez. The prosecution argued that this one made me laugh. So the prosecution argued that Hernandez was a sloppy burglar and often left a large mess and cigarettes behind while breaking into properties. The Dowalibys scene had like almost no damage besides
that's
the
for
basement
burglars
window.
though. He's kidnapping someone. Maybe he would use a little more
but
care.
There was also, I mean, he was arrested. He was labeled as a sex offender, but he also was in prison for burglary charges.
Oh, during the time?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, then it wasn't him.
Yeah, but they were just the only reason that the prosecution had him is because it also just like makes sense.
But they brought him up knowing that he was in prison during the... Oh, no, he was in prison after that. Never mind. Oh, okay, yeah, then that adds up. Sorry, I thought you were trying to say he was in prison during that time. I'm like, oh, why were they...
No. Like during the time of the trial, he was in prison.
Okay.
So they were just trying to pin it on him because...
If it's the MO of the previous crime.
if it's the MO, with the exception that Jaclyn was not sexually assaulted, though.
Okay.
And then also from what I read, the 6 to 7-year-old that Perry Hernandez assaulted, she actually lived, so she was let go.
Okay.
So he did what he did, and then she was free.
Okay. Terrible.
Yeah. So the Dowalibys never testified at their trial, and prior to closing arguments, the judge spoke privately with both the defense and the prosecution teams and told them that he believed there wasn't enough evidence to continue the case against Cynthia. David, however...
Ooh, that sucks.
David, however, faced the end of the trial to be charged with first-degree murder, and the jury found him guilty after a 3-day deliberation, and he was sentenced to 45 years in prison.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Rough. And it's all that circumstantial evidence, right?
Correct.
Okay.
After David was sentenced, Cynthia, family, friends set up a grassroots movement to prove David was innocent. Then, in October of 1991, the Illinois Court of Appeals reversed the conviction of first-degree murder and concealment of homicide because the evidence was not sufficient to find him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt and ordered David to be released.
That's fair. How long was he in prison?
Probably about a year.
Okay. Not terrible, but not super for being in Cook County prison.
No. So the prosecution still maintained that after his release that justice had not been served.
Yeah, no one has been named.
So now we're going to get into some of the theories. So we're going to touch base on David Dowaliby.
Damn, I was hoping, because a lot of these cases we touch on now, a lot are being cleared up now with DNA later.
I know, it's crazy.
And especially if you're telling me this guy was kind of sloppy with his crimes, that seems like there'd be something.
Yeah. So now we're going to touch base on the theories. We're going to start with David Dowaliby.
Okay.
So the police and FBI continued to believe that they were right with their original investigation, and David Dowaliby was the culprit.
Okay, David Dowaliby.
David Dowaliby, the
fun to
stepdad.
say.
I know. They alleged that he may have struck Jaclyn during an argument and killed her and not told Cynthia.
But there were no markings on her head or neck, right?
Right.
So that seems unlikely unless he punched her really hard in the chest.
Right. After Cynthia fell asleep, he could have just wrapped Jaclyn in the comforter quilt with the rope from the backyard and then carried her to the Chevy Malibu before driving her to where her body was later found. The evidence to put forward to support this was the blood O on the pillow. No fingerprints other than Dowaliby's were ever found at the scene, and the unidentified hairs matched Jaclyn's hair color found in the trunk of David's car.
Like, again, I feel like now we could test that and just see if it's hers or not. You know?
Right. The eyewitness who saw David's car, and David was picked out of a photo lineup by a transit worker, Everett Mann, who claimed he had saw David in the parking lot. It was questioned during trial about David's picture being bigger than the others. Experts have suggested, since Jaclyn was not sexually assaulted, and the way she was left suggested someone that cared for her was the culprit.
Okay.
So now we're going to touch base on David and Cynthia. The case against David and Cynthia is similar to the case against David.
Sure.
If Jaclyn was fatally injured during an argument, it might have been Cynthia that did it. The primary reason for Cynthia to be suspected along with David is that the killer would have carried Jaclyn out of the home through the front door that was found open the next day.
Like, if it was an inside job, they wouldn't. I guess they might have staged a scene. The one left the door.
That's what they're kind of leaning towards. So this would mean that they would have passed the couple's bedroom with the body after already going out into the backyard to fetch the rope later. The prosecution doubted that both David and Cynthia could have slept through all of this.
Yeah, that would make sense. Plus, like, I feel like the autopsy would show, like, if the rope wasn't involved, but it was just added later, it seems like she died of asphyxiation from the rope, right?
It seems like it, yeah.
So it seems like it's not an accidental hit.
But again, also you have to understand that since her face was just like decomposing, and they just couldn't get much either.
That's fair. Anything about the couple having like a history of violence? You mentioned they were spanking, but I mean, like 80s, 90s, that's not out of.
I mean, the spanking was also.
I got spanked. I deserved it. I'm a better person for it.
But you also have to remember that the spanking was claimed, but it was rang out that it was false.
Okay, but that's just like a boy versus his parents, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, hearsay.
Yeah. The next one that we're going to touch on is Perry Hernandez.
Okay.
Convicted sex offender and burglar, Perry Hernandez is one other suspect. This was ruled out as the Hernandez crime scene in 1989, although sharing some similarities, was littered with items he had knocked over while gaining entry into the property.
Okay, so he's a bit clumsy.
He's messy. Hernandez
That was one case of being clumsy, though. I mean, if it's so similar, that's still. I mean, I don't think that's.
Hernandez has also left fingerprints at the crime scene and also left a pack of cigarettes behind after allegedly having a smoke during the burglary, which aided to show the sloppiness he carried throughout his crimes. In the earlier 1988 disappearance of Jaclyn Dowaliby, no fingerprints were recovered, and if an intruder had gained entry, they had done it with such a professionalism and skill that Hernandez lacked.
Okay. I could still see it being plausible, though.
So I'm going to throw...
He wears gloves and doesn't smoke during this. Like, that's the only thing that could...
I know, but how could you be so, like, clean and then so sloppy after?
He broke a window to get in. It wasn't, like, super clean.
I know, but I'm just saying, like, compared to, like, just knocking shit over and then, like, having a smoke and then just, like...
Maybe he learned from his mistakes. And granted, he got arrested later, but...
But you have to think this one happened after.
Okay.
Jaclyn. So Jaclyn Dowaliby would have been first. And then
he got better at crime as he went along.
No, he would have gotten worse.
He got worse at crime as he went along. It was weighing on him and he got worse.
Okay, so now we're going to go into a new person that I'm going to throw at you. So this person is Timothy Guess. Timothy Guess was the mentally ill brother of Jaclyn's biological father, Jimmy Guess.
Okay.
He lived in Midlothian and worked nearby Park Avenue restaurant in Harvey. During the trial, the defense revealed that Timothy was schizophrenic and didn't have an alibi the night of Jaclyn's disappearance.
Okay, ding, 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 ding. Sounds like we have our winner.
Listen to this.
This all came up during the trial?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So he countered claiming that he was working, but witnesses and a lack of paperwork meant that he couldn't prove he was. Timothy also was linked to an apartment of a former girlfriend that sat near the field that Jaclyn was found. After David's release from prison, a reporter got to interview Timothy. This reporter, David Protests, claimed that Timothy knew the details of the crime that should not have been known and the layout of the Dowalibys' home. Timothy told them that he often heard voices in his head and suffered from blackouts.
Okay.
But the police claimed that Timothy may have been coerced during the interview.
All right.
This is like just wild. So this is just another theory. So they claim like just someone else. No name, just unknown. So there's a strong belief that someone outside of the family was involved based on the remains of the broken basement window. The window was originally believed to have been broken from the inside out, but later found to have been broken from the outside in. The defense alleged during the trial that this was likely the point of entry of the killer, but the prosecution pointed out that due to the lack of disturbed dust on the windowsill and the fact that the items on the TV stand and towel rack under the window hadn't been damaged or disturbed, is proof no one had climbed in.
Okay, so that was just broken in a separate incident?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The prosecution alleged that this could only be achieved by someone with prior knowledge of what was in the room, as any suspect would have been climbing in that night would be unable to see.
Okay, but they still said there was undisturbed dust, so I mean, like, it sounds like no one climbed through the broken window anyway.
So, unfortunately, the Jaclyn Dowaliby's murder still remains officially unsolved to this day.
Huh. But DNA evidence, maybe something can overturn it, but it sounds like her remains were unfortunately fairly composed, and we didn't take great DNA evidence in storage at the time, so I don't know if they would have...
Do you have who do you think could have done it?
It sounds like that brother is the most likely suspect. He doesn't have a clear alibi. He has a history of mental illness. I mean, does he have any other history of violence or crimes or anything that came up later?
I didn't see anything.
I mean, just
I just know that they just had like that blurb, and then they mentioned that he's not alive to this day, so he actually passed in 2002.
Okay. Well, based off what you told me, I'd like to say it's either that sex offender that did a similar crime or maybe the brother. That would fit kind of the crime MO a little better, but I don't know.
Yeah, when I was like reading it, I was like, I don't think this was the parents at all.
Doesn't seem like the parents. It just seems like another case of just sloppy police work, but...
I know, it's infuriating.
I would like to know more about that brother. That seems to be my likely suspect.
Yeah.
Where you land on it?
I kind of wanted to know more information about Timothy Guess also.
Okay.
Yeah.
If anybody knows anything about the case and wants to inform us, hit us up at imnotcrazypod@gmail.com or imnotcrazypod on social media.
Yeah, I would love to hear more if anyone has any insight or any information or any theories also. I would love to hear it, because I dove deep into this and I was trying to find what I could, but there wasn't much.
There wasn't a ton. Interesting local story for us.
Yeah.
That was the case of Jaclyn Dowaliby. If you like what you heard, make sure you like and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate and review. That would be great. It would help us greatly in the rankings.
Yeah.
If you want to hear more content, hit up the whole Majestic Jam Network, Cult Classics Podcast, Urban Hermit, the Highwire Podcast. And until then, we'll check you on the next one.
Bye.